The most exclusive restaurant in Manhattan stopped when Arab millionaire Amira Al-Zahra began breathing heavily, clutching her chest, while her eyes filled with terror. Waiters ran around confused without understanding what was happening. Billionaire clients watched awkwardly, and the manager desperately called an ambulance in English, while the woman continued whispering incomprehensible words in Arabic. No one understood that Amira was having a panic attack because she had recognized among the diners the man who had killed her son 30 years before in an unsolved hit-and-run. But when Layla Hassan, a part-time waitress working to pay for college, approached and spoke to her gently in perfect Arabic, everything changed. Amira clung to her like a lifeline and whispered the truth she had been hiding for decades. Her son's killer was sitting at table 7, and she had come to America for one reason only: revenge. Le Bernardin in Manhattan was the type of place where the world's powerful met to decide the fate of nations and corporations. That November evening, among tables illuminated by candles costing more than a normal salary, sat Russian oligarchs, American tycoons, and European aristocrats, speaking softly about billion-dollar investments. But everyone present noticed when she entered. Amira Al-Zahra was 72 years old with a dignity that filled the room. She wore a black silk abaya that must have been worth a fortune, her silver hair perfectly styled beneath a designer hijab, and around her neck a diamond necklace that sparkled under the soft lights. She was accompanied by 2 men in dark suits who emanated that aura of discreet professionalism typical of high-level bodyguards. Layla Hassan observed the scene from her position behind the service counter. At 22, the Palestinian-American girl worked as a part-time waitress to pay for her studies in international relations at Columbia. Her grandmother had been Palestinian, teaching her Arabic and traditions, but Layla never expected that knowledge would become so important. The restaurant manager, James Wellington, personally welcomed Mrs. Al-Zahra with the respect due to someone whose wealth was estimated at over $3 billion. Amira was the widow of a great Saudi industrialist and now controlled an empire spanning from oil to luxury goods. Her presence at the restaurant was an event that would be talked about for weeks in Manhattan's high-finance circles. Layla immediately noticed something strange in the woman's behavior. While being escorted to her reserved table, Amira obsessively scrutinized the other diners, as if searching for someone specific. Her eyes moved with surgical precision from face to face, and when they landed on a distinguished man in his 60s sitting at table 7, Layla saw something that made her shiver. On Amira Al-Zahra's face appeared an expression of pure hatred, immediately followed by what seemed like terror. The man at table 7 was evidently American, dining with what appeared to be his wife and 2 other couples, laughing loudly while telling some work anecdote. He had no idea that someone was watching him with such intensity. Amira sat at her table but didn't touch the menu. She ordered only mint tea and remained seated rigidly, eyes fixed on the man at table 7. Her bodyguards noticed the tension and exchanged worried glances, but didn't intervene. Layla, who had learned to read people during her years working in the restaurant industry, understood something important was happening. The situation escalated around 10 in the evening. The man at table 7 got up to use the restroom, and in doing so, turned slightly toward Amira's direction. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second, and what happened next shocked the entire restaurant. Amira began breathing heavily, bringing one hand to her chest, while the other gripped the table. Her eyes filled with tears, and she began whispering something in Arabic, her voice increasingly agitated. The bodyguards immediately approached, but she pushed them away with frantic gestures, continuing to stare at the man who now looked at her with curiosity and slight concern. Manager Wellington rushed over, extremely worried. A crisis involving such an important client in his restaurant could mean the end of his career. He began speaking in English, asking if she needed medical help, if he should call an ambulance. But Amira continued repeating phrases in Arabic that no one understood. becoming increasingly agitated. That's when Layla made the most important decision of her life. She left her position behind the counter and gently approached Amira, kneeling beside her chair. In perfect Arabic, with the accent her grandmother had taught her, she whispered, "Al-Zahra Sayyida, Ana Yumkin an Usaidak. Matha Hadath?" The effect was immediate. Amira turned toward Layla with eyes full of desperation and relief, as if she had seen an angel. She gripped the girl's hand and began speaking rapidly in Arabic, words flowing like a river after years of forced silence. What Amira told Layla in those frantic minutes would change their lives forever. 30 years before, her 18-year-old son Omar had died in a hit-and-run accident in Los Angeles during a study abroad program. The driver had fled, the case was archived, but Amira never stopped searching for the truth. She had spent millions on private investigators, followed every lead, and finally found her son's killer. The man at Table 7 was Michael Patterson, then a young scion of a Manhattan investment banking family. In 1994, he was in Los Angeles for business, had hit Omar while driving drunk, then fled using his family connections to cover everything up. Amira had spent 30 years gathering sufficient evidence and tracking him down. Now she had come to America with a precise plan: to ruin him economically, socially, legally. But seeing his face in person, hearing his laughter, had brought back pain so intense it caused a panic attack. Layla listened in silence as Amira explained her intention to destroy this man, piece by piece, just as he had destroyed her family. But what neither Amira nor Layla knew was that Michael Patterson had recognized them both. He had heard their exchange in Arabic and understood that his past had finally caught up with him, and now he was planning his move to eliminate them both before they could ruin the life he had built on the ashes of that boy who died 30 years before. In the days following that dramatic encounter at the restaurant, Layla found herself catapulted into a world of secrets, revenge, and denied justice that went far beyond her experience as a college student. Amira Al-Zahra wasn't just a wealthy widow seeking truth. She was a woman who had dedicated half her life to planning the methodical destruction of the man who had killed her son. Amira invited Layla to her suite at the Plaza, a luxury apartment she had transformed into a true operational headquarters. The walls were covered with photographs, documents, maps, and a detailed timeline of 30 years of research. At the center of everything, a photo of Omar Al-Zahra, an 18-year-old smiling boy with eyes full of dreams he would never realize. The story Amira told Layla was one of injustice spanning decades. In 1994, Omar was in Los Angeles to perfect his English before starting university studies. He was a brilliant young man, passionate about engineering and technology, who dreamed of modernizing his father's oil business with sustainable innovations. The night of the accident, he was walking back from the library when Michael Patterson, then 24, had hit him at full speed. Witnesses had seen a black Mercedes fleeing the scene, but the investigation had been incredibly superficial. The Patterson family had enormous political and economic influence, and the case was quickly archived as a hit-and-run with unknown driver. Omar had died instantly, his dreams shattered along with his body. But Amira never gave up. She hired private investigators, bribed officials to access classified documents, followed every trail for decades. The breakthrough came 2 years earlier when she managed to identify Michael as the perpetrator through a combination of modern technology and infinite patience. Layla listened fascinated as Amira showed her the accumulated evidence: photos of the damaged Mercedes secretly repaired, testimonies from mechanics who had been paid to remain silent, recordings of compromising conversations obtained over the years. Michael Patterson had built his current fortune partly because he never paid for that crime, never had to face costly trials or the reputational damage that would have resulted. But what struck Layla most was discovering that Michael hadn't stopped at that vehicular homicide. In the 30 years since, he had accumulated a list of financial crimes, corruption, and ethically questionable behavior that made the 1994 incident pale in comparison. He had become a serial predator in the business world, ruining small family companies to expand his empire, bribing politicians, evading taxes on industrial scales. Amira had planned her revenge with Arab precision. She didn't want to simply kill him or have him arrested. She wanted him to lose everything he had built on her son's blood. She wanted his children to see their father for what he truly was, his wife to discover she had married a killer, his business partners to abandon him when the truth came to light. Amira's plan had been in motion for months. She had secretly acquired shares in several of Michael's partner companies, gathered compromising information about his illegal dealings, prepared a media campaign that would destroy his reputation. But that evening at the restaurant, seeing her son's killer's face had overwhelmed her emotionally. Layla found herself increasingly involved in this story of denied justice. Amira needed someone who could move freely in Manhattan's environment, someone who spoke both perfect English and Arabic, someone who could be her eyes and ears where she couldn't reach. The girl was perfect for that role, but Layla didn't know that accepting to help Amira would put her in mortal danger. Michael Patterson had recognized the threat the two women represented and was already planning their elimination. He had contacts in Manhattan's criminal underworld, people who, for the right price, were willing to make anyone disappear. And Amira Al-Zahra, however wealthy and powerful, was still a foreigner alone in a country she didn't truly know. The war between Amira and Michael was about to begin, a war that would involve not only the two of them, but also the people they loved. Layla was about to discover that sometimes the search for justice can lead to consequences no one is prepared to face. Amira's revenge began with precision, reflecting 30 years of methodical planning. Layla became her unofficial assistant, using her position at the restaurant and her studies in international relations to infiltrate Manhattan's business environment. The girl discovered she had a natural talent for this world of subterfuge and complex strategies, helped by her ability to move invisibly between two cultures. The first blow was financial. Amira publicly revealed, through an anonymous dossier sent to financial newspapers, Michael's tax irregularities, documents she had obtained by bribing officials from his own staff. The effect was devastating. The IRS immediately opened an investigation. Investors began withdrawing funds, and his company's stock crashed 40% in a week. Michael immediately understood he was under attack but couldn't identify the enemy.
Enjoying the story? Give it a little like, and don't forget to subscribe. Now then, let's carry on.
The evidence was too precise to be random, too targeted to be generic. Someone had been studying him for years. He hired private investigators to discover who was behind the attack, but Amira had covered her tracks too well. The second blow was personal. Amira arranged for Michael's wife to receive, through a mutual friend, photographs documenting his extramarital affairs of the last 10 years, photos she had obtained by hiring investigators who had followed Michael since 2010. The woman, discovering her husband's systematic betrayal, immediately filed for divorce and asset separation, taking half the family wealth. But it was the third blow that demonstrated the truly ruthless nature of this war. Amira managed to convince Michael's eldest son, David, to meet Layla at a downtown cafe. The girl, pretending to be a freelance journalist interested in a story about the Patterson family, gradually revealed to David the truth about the 1994 accident. She showed the evidence, documents, photographs. The young man was devastated to discover his father was a killer. Michael realized someone knew his darkest secret when David confronted him that same evening, asking about Omar Al-Zahra's death. The reaction was immediate and violent. Michael understood it was time to physically eliminate the threat before his past completely destroyed his present. He started with Layla. Michael had identified the girl as the key connection between him and the mysterious enemy. He had Layla followed by professionals, discovered where she lived, what her habits were. Then he organized what was supposed to look like a random accident, a car with brake failure just as Layla was crossing the street near Columbia. But Amira had anticipated this move too. Her bodyguards had been protecting Layla for weeks and intervened at the crucial moment, pushing the girl out of the killer car's trajectory. The driver, a criminal hired by Michael, crashed into a tree and died instantly before he could confess who had paid him. The failed assassination was an open declaration of war. Amira understood Michael was willing to do anything to protect his secret, including murder. Layla realized for the first time how dangerous the game she was playing truly was. But instead of backing down, both women decided to intensify their attack. The final blow was already in preparation. A press conference where Amira would publicly reveal her son's killer's identity, supported by incontrovertible evidence, and Layla's testimony as interpreter and witness. But Michael had planned his final move: eliminate both women during the press conference itself, making it appear they were victims of a random terrorist attack. The final battle between justice and impunity was about to begin. The press conference was held at Manhattan's most luxurious hotel, with international journalists attracted by the promise of a shocking revelation involving important figures of the American establishment. Amira had orchestrated everything with military precision. Every detail had been planned to maximize the media impact of her revelation. Layla sat beside Amira, her heart beating wildly as she simultaneously translated the woman's statements from Arabic to English for the journalists present. What was about to happen would forever change their lives and Michael Patterson's. But neither knew the man had planted an explosive in the hotel, programmed to detonate during the conference. Amira began by telling Omar's story, the brilliant son who dreamed of building technological bridges between the Arab world and America. She showed photos of the smiling young man, spoke of his shattered dreams, of a mother's pain who had lost everything. Journalists listened in religious silence as Layla translated every word with emotional precision that conveyed all of Amira's suffering. Then came the revelation. Amira publicly accused Michael Patterson of killing her son in 1994 and covering up the crime using family connections. The evidence was overwhelming. Official documents proving Michael's presence in Los Angeles that night, testimonies from mechanics who had repaired the damaged Mercedes, recordings of compromising conversations. The media effect was explosive even before the real explosive. Television networks interrupted their programs to broadcast the statements live. Social media filled with the story. Patterson Company stock prices crashed in real time. Michael was watching everything from his office, knowing his life was ending before his eyes. But it was then that Layla made the discovery that changed everything. Noticing something strange in the nervous behavior of one of the hotel staff, she managed to identify the explosive hidden under the stage. With courage she didn't know she possessed, she immediately stopped the conference and evacuated the room seconds before detonation. The explosion destroyed much of the conference room, but caused no casualties thanks to Layla's timely intervention. Evidence against Michael had already been broadcast worldwide, and now there was also an attempted multiple murder. There was no longer any escape for him. Michael Patterson was arrested that same evening. The evidence Amira had collected over 30 years of research, combined with the failed attack, built an unassailable legal case. The man who believed he could forever escape the consequences of his actions finally found himself face to face with justice. Michael Patterson's trial became the most followed judicial case in America that year. Layla testified as interpreter and key witness, detailing the restaurant encounter, Amira's confession, and the failed attack. Her testimony was crucial in proving premeditation and the defendant's dangerousness. Amira could finally tell her complete story publicly. 30 years of pain, research, sacrifices to obtain justice for her son. Her account moved all of America and became a symbol of the fight against the impunity of the powerful. Michael was sentenced to life imprisonment for voluntary manslaughter, attempted mass murder, and a series of other financial crimes that emerged during investigations. Layla became an involuntary celebrity, the brave girl who had saved dozens of lives and helped a mother obtain justice. But she preferred to remain focused on her studies, though now with a completely different perspective on international justice and human rights. Amira offered Layla a full scholarship to finish university and then work at her foundation dedicated to victims of unsolved crimes. The girl accepted, understanding her destiny was linked to the fight for social justice. Together, they founded a center that helped families of unpunished crime victims using Amira's wealth and Layla's linguistic and investigative skills. The Bernardin became famous worldwide as the place where one of the most incredible justice stories in modern history began. Manager Wellington, initially terrified by the scandal, discovered the notoriety had brought clients from around the world curious to see where it all started. 5 years after that night that changed everything, Layla graduated magna cum laude in international relations with a thesis on transnational financial crimes. Amira was present at the ceremony, proud of the girl she now considered like an adopted daughter. Together, they had transformed pain into hope, revenge into social justice. The Omar Al-Zahra Foundation had become one of the world's most respected human rights organizations, with offices in 10 countries and hundreds of resolved cases. Layla had become its American director, specializing in crimes involving foreign victims and language barriers that often prevented access to justice. Amira had finally found the peace she had been seeking for 30 years. She hadn't only obtained justice for Omar, but had transformed her personal tragedy into a force for good, helping hundreds of other families. Michael Patterson was serving life imprisonment, all his assets confiscated to compensate his crime's victims. The story of that night at the restaurant continued to be told, becoming a symbol of how one person's courage can change many others' destiny. Layla often returned to Le Bernardin, no longer as a waitress, but as a guest of honor, remembering the night when 2 simple words in Arabic had unleashed a revolution of justice. At the table where Amira sat that first evening, there was now a discreet plaque remembering the importance of extending a hand to those in need, regardless of the language they speak. Because sometimes it's enough to understand the right words at the right moment to save a life and change the world. The last time Amira and Layla dined together at the restaurant, the elderly woman looked at the girl who had helped her and said in perfect English, a language she had learned to honor her son's dream, "Omar would have been proud of you. You realized his dream of building bridges between cultures, but you did it in the most beautiful way possible. Through justice." Layla smiled, knowing her life had found a meaning that went far beyond what she could have ever imagined when she was just a student working to pay for her studies. Sometimes destiny calls us through the simplest words, spoken in the right language, at the right moment. And when we respond to that call, everything can change. Amira and Layla's story proved that justice can arrive even after decades, that a mother's love for her son can overcome any obstacle, and that sometimes all it takes is a brave girl who speaks Arabic to change the course of history. Because the right words, said at the right moment, can tear down walls built with 30 years of lies and open doors to a future of truth and hope. Like if you believe justice can arrive even after decades. Comment which moment struck you most in this story. Share to inspire those who never stopped searching for truth. Subscribe for more stories of justice, courage, and redemption. Sometimes knowing the right language is enough to change a life. Sometimes courage is found in the most unexpected moments. And sometimes justice arrives through the hands of those you least expect. Because every word spoken with heart can become a bridge to hope.